All right. Yeah, I know I'm late. But we're waiting 152 days for college football, plus another 16 hours and 21 minutes or so. So you can wait 8 or 9 minutes for me. But I do appreciate that you guys would wait for me. And maybe that should be my next goal in life for this channel is to be on time with my live streams. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Thank you so much for dropping by. This is where we will be each and every Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern time. Every Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern time, right here to talk college football with you. I will remind you that the Super Chat is on. You can help us build the channel in a number of ways. Of course, hit that like button, which somebody told me the other day that it's difficult to find the like button feature on a phone. Is that true? Somebody let me know in the comments section. Is that difficult on a phone to find the like button? Maybe that's a reason why I don't get as many likes as I think I should. But again, welcome into the CallIn Show on a Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern time. We will be here each and every week. Last week, our first edition. I'm not entirely pleased or happy with this. What do you guys think? Let me know. We're trying some things out, trying to give you a better looking presentation and set. We are featuring the one numbers blocked out there. We're 152 days away from college football if we kick off on time on August 29th, week 0. All right. The number's 860-325-3687. I've got 2 questions for everyone. 2 questions. You can either leave your comments in the live chat or you can call in. Got 2 questions for you. One would be concerning and considering what we're facing right now. What would you do? What would you give up? What would you pay to guarantee that we're going to have college football in 2020? What would you give up? That would be near and dear to you. What would you pay? What amount of money? What would you do to guarantee? How precious is college football to you? What would you give up, pay? What would you do to guarantee a college football season in 2020? That's our question number 1. And not to confuse anyone, but I came up with 2 questions for the night. Question number 2 is, and I know we've got crazy people out there, you guys and gals, love your college football, love your sports. So I can only imagine what kind of responses I'm going to get. My question is, what have you done in the past? Meaning, what have you paid? What is an extreme amount of money that you've paid? What extreme measures have you gone to? What mountains have you moved to go to a college football game? I will leave it open to any sporting event, but we want to focus on college football if at all possible. But for a good story, I'll take any sporting event. What have you done in terms of like breaking the bank or driving an insane amount of miles in a short period of time? Or what have you done to see a college football game that you just desperately needed to see, whether that be in person, not necessarily in person, just to see the game? And I will share some of my experience as well. You know what we want to try to do, which I forgot to do because I typically use the mic here and we're still working out our issues with our phone line. What I would like to do is get off the mic so we can better hear the phone calls because that's been successful in the past. So let me know that you can still hear me. Let me know. Can everybody still hear me? I will take the thumbs up on this. We got 67 comments I got to pick up. I got to get to. Can everybody hear me? Because I want to be able to have everyone hear the phone calls coming in. Kyle says yes. Thank you so much. Oh, yes. Dale, let's revisit the 18 playoff. Yes, we will do that. Much to talk about. So this is the best format that we can set up right now, considering our issues with the call-in process, is for me to go off mic. You can still hear me, and you can also hear the phone calls. We've tested it out in the past, 860-325-3687. I want to let everyone know to please follow me on Twitter. We have polls available there. I am posting college football polls on a regular basis, meaning just about every day on Twitter. So please follow me on Twitter at Mark Rogers TV. We posted a Twitter poll the other day asking you, of course, knowing that we've got Ohio State, Florida State, and Miami live streams each week. Ohio State, Florida State, and Miami each week. If we were going to add another one, or if we were just going to bring in some guests and do another live stream for another team, which is what we've been doing in recent weeks. You've probably caught some of those. Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, Auburn, Alabama, Florida. Who else have we done? USC and some others. So you responded with 327 votes total, 327 votes total. And here are the vote totals. And yes, I will get to your comments. So your live stream preference looks like this. Florida 36%, LSU 26, Michigan 25, Clemson 16. Rather close. Thank you for the 327 votes on your live stream preference in addition to what we deliver right now. So I will be contacting David Waters from Gators Breakdown and Jackie Franchuli from Gators Territory and others to talk Florida football this week. We will do a live stream hopefully this week on Florida football. All right. My next question, sometime in the past couple of weeks on Twitter, was I was very curious as to who was winning at what rate. We know that the Power Five is dominant over the Group of Five, obviously, but at what percentage? So over the course of the 2019 season, the Group of Five played the Power Five 104 times, and I asked you, what do you think the record was between the Power Five and the Group of Five? And guys are smart. 42% responded with the correct answer, meaning that 42% of you said that the final total for 2019 was 83-21, Power Five over Group of Five. All right. If you were with us last Sunday night, it's, let me find it here. There it is. It's intriguing to me that from one college football season to the next, that about something like a third of the teams in Power Five football, I didn't look at the Group of Five, I looked at the Power Five, about a third of the teams either increase their win total by at least 3 games or it decreases by at least 3 games. That is significant because it's generally my thought that the elite teams stay the elite teams and the next tier stays the next tier, Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, etc., and on down to the bottom. And this is how college football pretty much stays year to year to year, and it's rather boring. Hate to say it about the game I love, that we all love, but it's boring in regards to speculation and projection toward the college football playoff. Who is going to make the playoff this year? Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, Georgia, Oklahoma, some configuration of that. But I'm surprised at how many teams either have their win totals increase by at least 3 games or decrease by at least 3 games every year. It was 20 out of 75 in the Power Five this past season from 2019 to 2020. 20 out of 75. That's about 30%. I find that pretty significant. Think about the Big Ten. For example, 5 of 14 teams in the Big Ten had their win totals increase by at least 3 or decrease by 3, meaning Minnesota went from 6-6 to 10-2. Northwestern went from 8-4 to 3-9. We had Indiana go from 5-7 to 8-4. Wisconsin from 7-5 to 10-2. And Illinois from 3-9 to 6-6. 5 teams out of 14 in the Big Ten. 5 in the ACC out of 14 ACC teams had their win totals move by at least 3 games. It's significant. So my question on Twitter, and again, follow me on Twitter. And if you follow me on Twitter, I will give you authority to post questions. You will give me poll questions and I will put them on Twitter. So I won't have to think of all of them. So please follow me on Twitter, Mark Rogers TV. So the 4 most likely candidates I came up with, and there are a ton of them. Everybody could increase or decrease by 3 wins, roughly, just about everybody. 369 votes, very close tally here. It was pretty much dead even across the board between Arkansas, 2-10 last year. They would have to go to 5-7 this year. Northwestern, 3-9 last year, would have to go to at least 6-6 this year. TCU, usually a contender in the Big 12, down year last year at 5-7. A lot of close losses for Gary Patterson. They would have to improve to 8-4 or drop to 2-10. I don't think anybody's thinking it's going that way. Stanford would have to increase by 3 wins, going from 4-8. Unusual to see Stanford at 4-8, going to 7-5. So that was our question right there. So thank you for the vote. Our next question, specifically targeting Miami fans. Are you happy that Manny Diaz is your head coach? Plain and simple. Are you happy that he's the head man at the U? 418 votes. Thank you for the vote. 55% said yes. 45% said no. Now, Mike Norvell has yet to lose a game at Florida State. So this is a bit more easy to answer to a certain extent. We'll wait till he starts out 1-3. I'm not saying he's going to, but if he would. 559 of you voted. And unfortunately, with the team-specific polls, I can't, there's no way to filter out the non-fans of that particular team that I'm asking about. But to Florida State fans, were you in favor of the Mike Norvell hire? 83% said yes. Of course, he's not lost a game yet. And we've got a Florida State rushing category poll running right now. We will reveal those results on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock Eastern time on our Florida State Seminoles live show. 7 o'clock on Tuesday night. Follow me on Twitter at Mark Rogers TV. We did have somebody call in. I missed the call. Please call in at 860-325-3687. Again, our 2 questions tonight. One would be, what would you give up? What would you give? What would you do to ensure, to guarantee a 2020 college football season? How important is it for you to see college football this year? What would you pay? What would you give up? What would you do? What extreme measure would you take to see college football this fall? Question number 2 is, what have you done in the past to see a college football game? Not necessarily just in person, but probably for most of you that would be in person. What ridiculous amount of money did you fork over? What mountains did you have to move? What insane drive did you have to make? What kind of deal did you have to cut with somebody? What shift did you have to work or trade? What did you have to do to see the college football game? Or for a good story, I will leave it open to any sporting event. What did you do? What sacrifice did you make to see the game you needed to see? Please subscribe to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. You know these live streams are coming when you subscribe and turn on the bell with the notifications. 860-325-3687. All right, let's go to the live chat. So for anybody who commented before 10:03, my apologies. I've lost it. I know that you still can see them on YouTube on the live chat, but I can't see them here. I use an application called StreamYard, and after a certain amount of minutes go by, I can't go back that far and pull the comments to the screen, unfortunately. Nate reminding me, Nate, I can always count on you. Mark's late again. And for that, I'm going to take a sip of water. Hi, Cheryl. Good to see you. Dale, yeah, if it goes south for Michigan early, Jim Harbaugh will lose the locker room just like he did in San Francisco. They couldn't wait to lose him. I'm almost feeling bad for Jim Harbaugh at this point. I'm feeling bad for a guy that makes over $7 million a year. Kyle, adding to the weight. Yes. Would it help if I actually had music playing during the weight? What would you like to hear? Nate, online school tomorrow. Let's buckle down. Let's get the job done, Nate. No complaining. Just show up, put the head down, grind, work hard. Dale, come on, Mark. All right. Kyle, Mark Rogers is acting like Trump now, being late but full of news. Exactly. Full of news. And with me, you can rest assured it's factual. Hi, Sam. Good to see you. Have I seen your handle in the chat before, Sam? Sam may deserve a big welcome here. Did I fall asleep? Well, I've done that a couple times today already. All right. Do we have any questions or comments in here? Dale's wanting to know if I'm checking my hair color. What should I go with this week? Maybe a little streak of pink, or well, red goes with if I combine the black with a little red, I match the logo. Got a call coming in.
The call will start at the beep.
Hey, it's Mark Rogers, CB, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
It's Nate Kingston.
Hi, Nate.
Hello.
You had to wait on me tonight, huh?
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, I was like, what's going on, Mark? Do you sleep or not? Or I was confused.
You shouldn't be confused. Maybe a little frustrated or a little put off by it, but not necessarily confused. I typically am late for these, and sometimes there's a good reason for it, but many times there are not. This is one of my many faults in life. I'm typically late for just about everything, unless somebody's really counting on me. So what's on your mind?
Yeah.
Nate? You've got some school tomorrow, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a senior in high school right now, so I want to be done. But I don't think it's gonna happen.
I remember that feeling. Sure.
Yeah, but so I saw a lot of chat about Oregon and Ohio State.
Yeah.
Live chat. Yeah, I mean, I want a close game, like what I said, like last time against Michigan and Ohio State. I want a good game, not a blowout. So I really want a good game, not a blowout. I have to give it to Ohio State by 3 points. 31-28.
Okay, we've got a score prediction from Eugene in week 2. Ohio State wins 31-28. That sounds like a good game to me.
Yeah. I know I'm a Michigan fan, Nebraska fan, but I think Fields will do like 2,000 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Okay. We've got a stat prediction as well out of you, Nate. That's much better than I can give you right now. I trust that you
Yeah.
did see my Michigan schedule preview today.
Yeah, I like that actually.
Okay.
but
I gave you
But I
no
hope
guaranteed losses.
yeah.
And I took a lot of grief for that too.
Yeah. I mean, were the hot ups with Washington and Ohio State, right? Or is it? I forgot.
You forgot what?
Just the toss up games for Michigan.
Well, I gave them quite a few. I've got Washington, Iowa, I believe Minnesota, and Ohio State. Also Penn State and Wisconsin. There's a lot of toss-up games for Michigan. And I know that's a bit wishy-washy, and that's kind of taking the middle of the road, or I'm on the fence right now, but it's March. I will make predictions on the games in the season when the time comes.
Yeah, I actually want Michigan to win all of them, but not too really high hopes. But realistically, I don't think they will make. I don't know. I just want to wait and see. But actually, since I have school tomorrow, I'm supposed to go to bed like at 9:30 Central Time. But it's fine.
It's coming up. I don't want to be the cause of you staying up too late. You need to get your rest there,
no,
Nate.
I get it. But I was just wanting to talk to you for a little bit.
Thank you so much, Nate. We appreciate the support. Thank you so much for the phone call. You have a great day online at school tomorrow.
Yeah, well.
Take care, Nate. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. The number is 860-325-3687. And again, our two questions for the night. Maybe I shouldn't have confused everyone. Maybe I should have separated these two questions as a question of the night, but I thought of both today, and they're kind of connected. Going into your past, what have you given up? What have you paid? What price have you paid? What have you sacrificed? What have you done? What extreme measures have you gone to get to a college football game or watch a college football game? And also, what would you do? What would you give up? What would you pay to guarantee a 2020 season this year, considering our current circumstances? All right. For our folks on Patreon, here in the next couple of days, I'm going to be shooting a video and posting a video for them with a bit of an insider look at what we do here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, what the vision is, the brand, what I'm planning, what we hope to build and accomplish here. So please check us out on Patreon. And thank you for the Patreons, our subscribers over there right now. Please shop at Amazon using the link in the description section of any of the videos. So in any of the videos where you see Amazon listed, grab that link. Same shopping experience. You help us build the channel. And again, the super chat's on. All right, back to the comments. Todd says Oregon doesn't have a chance. Y'all think because you got 3 5-star players, you're winning a national championship. Ha, 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 ha. Let's go to the phone lines.
The call will start at the beep.
It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
How's it going, Mark? It's Grant.
Hey, Grant.
So I kind of wanted to ask you, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the recruiting lately, but I want to know your thoughts on Tony Alford missing out on kind of everybody in 2020 and then landing Travion Henderson.
Travion Henderson and also the kid Pryor.
Who I think is also really not being talked about enough.
You don't think Pryor's being talked about enough?
No, I think Pryor's. Well, he was a top 5 back. I believe he's the number 6 running back right now. But I mean, I think that's I think that's going to be the best 1-2 running back haul in the 2021 class.
Yeah, so I don't know if you're able to catch our Ohio State live streams every week, but we've talked quite a bit about Ryan Day and his recruiting haul, and specifically the past couple of weeks with the prior commitment and now the Henderson commitment about Tony Alford stepping up and getting the job done. I don't know that there has been any kind of change or adjustment in their approach, specifically at running back or Alford's approach. I can't think that there has been. There are a lot of factors that go into being able to sign the elite at any position. And just because they miss on a few guys against there's an automatic for all the advantages that Ohio State has. Let's understand that most of the elite players that they sign are out of state. And even though it's in a very, very attractive place to go to play football, to move on to the next level, to be on the big stage, play for championships, there's still a level of difficulty of prying somebody out of SEC territory.
Exactly. Well, you count Virginia as SEC territory?
Oh, yeah, the kid, yeah. I don't. No, I don't. I was forgetting about Henderson being from, Hopewell, Virginia. I don't know exactly where that is, but no, that's not SEC territory. That's, of course, ACC territory, and the ties there aren't nearly as strong as I worked in SEC territory for 6 years. And didn't just work there. I worked in the business. I worked in media covering all the teams. And I don't think there's any question, and I may offend Big 10, Big 12, ACC, and Pac-12 fans, but I don't think there's any question that there are stronger ties in SEC country to those folks down there, to their teams. Not every individual, but overall. And therefore, I think there's a natural bias down there that if you grow up in the middle of Georgia, that even if you don't stay at Georgia, that you just consider SEC football to be the football. That's the football that you watch, that's the football you're surrounded by. That's what everybody's talking about all the time. And to be able to pluck a kid out of Georgia or South Carolina or Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, mainly it's been Georgia and Florida, of course, for Ohio State, I think is still a significant lift, and they need to be given a lot of credit to be able to do that.
Exactly. And then another question I wanted to ask, is kind of a different one, is, so say there was a scenario where 2020 doesn't happen for college football.
Mm-hmm.
And with everything going on, do you think, since Justin Fields has only had 1 year under his belt, he would still go to the draft, or would he come back in 2021? Because I think Trevor Lawrence would leave for the draft because he's already had 2 full years to start it.
Yeah, and I think your point is logical if we're just talking about football. If we're just talking about preparation and readiness for the NFL, that makes total sense. In that Trevor Lawrence may have been a better quarterback over the second half of 2018 than actually that he was this past season. But I'm not saying he's not developing, but the performance on the field wasn't quite as good. And actually, he showed us some flaws in his game early in 2019 and against LSU. He didn't have the best night. But he's certainly a more polished quarterback throwing the ball downfield than Justin Fields. So if we're just strictly evaluating as quarterbacks ready for the NFL, then you're right on point. But if Justin Fields gets positive draft feedback when they grade him out and evaluate him, and he's going to be a first-round pick or whatever at whatever point he deems it worthy to come out and make money, then that might be more important to him than being ready to play in the NFL.
Exactly. Yeah, that and then going back to the Ohio State recruiting, I think Ryan Day and staff kind of looked at it from a standpoint of, well, nobody's able to take visits right now. Right now is our chance to do this FaceTime over the phone better than anybody and prove who we really are.
Yeah, I find it
secure
interesting.
these guys before. Well, yeah, and secure these guys before it opens back up, and these guys can visit all the SEC schools, the Oklahomas, the Texas.
Well, with all due respect, in talking, for example, today we did a live stream, or not today, that was yesterday, we did a live stream with Cam Underwood from State of the U on Miami. And this is just one example. When I mention recruiting to some of these writers that follow other schools, they kind of do a double take, and they're surprised that I'm asking them about what's happened in recruiting, because they're basically just figuring that it's a dead period and nobody can get anything done. And then I let them know that this is what's going on at Ohio State. They have not wasted any time. They have not considered this a time to lay back. They've pressed in and gotten it done.
Exactly. And then another question I wanted to ask you was, who's your football team? Who do you support?
Okay. Grant, how long you been watching?
In the last year.
In the last year?
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised after a year you haven't figured this out. So, no, I like this.
I'm going to say
So,
Ohio State.
pardon me?
I'm going to say you're an Ohio State fan.
I'm an Ohio State fan. You got that right. I enjoy, and I think I'm doing my job when people watch for a period of time and they're still not able to figure it out. Even though I mention it from time to time, I don't shy away from it, but I also don't promote it, because I try to cover, and I do my best to cover everyone.
So I guess one of the last questions I wanted to ask you is, when you look at it right now at the college football landscape, who do you think has their program set up the best right now for future success to be the next Clemson, the next dynasty, the 2 national titles in a 3-year run? Or do you think it's too early to tell?
Well, it's too early to tell whether it's one particular school, but we can all clearly see the couple schools that are right there. I think the 3 that I have a tremendous amount of confidence in are Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State. The 4th that's recruiting just as well as those 3, but I don't necessarily have quite as much confidence in Kirby Smart. He's really good. He's tremendous. He has upgraded that program from a top 10 to 15 program to a top 3 or 4 program, but he hasn't necessarily shown himself to me to be the game manager and the decision maker on the sideline that I would like to see in critical moments. So I have a little bit more confidence in the other 3 than I do Georgia.
Well, see, I think Georgia, it could be smart this year, going to get Jamie Newman from Wake Forest to, he didn't win anything at Wake Forest, but I think with what he had around him, he did a really good job, and I think he's a dynamic athlete and player. I think Georgia's got a bunch of great running backs and some good young receivers.
Sure.
If he takes the cuffs off of Todd Monken, the new offensive coordinator, and lets Newman play his game, I think Georgia could win the SEC.
And somebody asked, I don't think it was you, I think it was somebody else asked me about Georgia football just a couple of weeks ago during a call-in show, and asked, what is it going to take for Georgia to break through? And I listed the things that you just mentioned, basically that a number one, for as good as Jake Fromm was, and I don't think he necessarily gets the credit that he deserves, because everybody's looking at the very best, and no, he wasn't the best, but he was a top 10 quarterback in the nation. But he was probably somewhere between 5 and 10. That they do have this component with Jamie Newman in terms of a dynamic runner that they didn't have before. And that causes all sorts of problems for a defense. That dimension just completely changes a game plan and what you can do on offense.
Well, and I think Georgia's they're going to have a dominant defense. That's just that's their game. They're going to have a great defense, and that's why I'm saying if he can not, hey, let's line up and run it down their throat every play, let's spread it out, I think Georgia can be a real pain.
And then I also mentioned that for as much as I think it's boring that we're getting to a point where everybody's running pretty much the same offense in college football, the way Georgia has approached it has, much like LSU a few years ago, it's not working. Therefore, they need to update their offense. There's no question about that. And so we'll see if they have a more dynamic offense and do all the things that most teams across the country are implementing. It's a copycat sport, more so than any sport on the planet. And we have a few teams like Georgia, Miami, LSU a few years ago that are kind of behind the curve. They have the talent, but the offensive system isn't up to date. And we'll see if they're able to transition with speed at quarterback and transition their offense to a 2020 looking offense and not a 2005 looking offense.
Well, I think Georgia should have given Joe Brady a blank check then.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And that's going to be interesting to see what happens at LSU minus Joe Burrow and Joe Brady, of course.
Well, and Dave Aranda as well. They lost a lot.
Yeah, sure. But
it was like,
do you really expect it not to be an LSU defense? And that defense last year played extremely well down the stretch, but that was not a vintage LSU defense for most of the season. So I have a lot of respect for Dave Aranda, but they have succeeded with other defensive coordinators, and certainly with the one that they have back in Bo Pelini, who's won a national championship at LSU. So I'm not so concerned about the defense. Not that they're not going to miss Dave Aranda, not that he's not a good coach, but what Brady brought and Burrow and that combination was just, to go from 16 touchdown passes, 16 touchdown passes one season to 60. That's insane.
Well, LSU's only question mark is their quarterback. Because you got Jamar Chase, you got Terrace Marshall returning, and then you got a ton of good young running backs. And then I do believe they lost, I think it was 3 or 4 of their starters on the line. That'll be a question too. But they recruit as good as anybody.
Sure they do. All right, Grant.
All right, Mark. Yep.
Appreciate the call.
Yep, take care.
Have a good night.
Yep, you too. Bye.
Sam Bell, I went to see Tennessee-Indiana game at Jacksonville Stadium. That was the past bowl game, right? All right. Got a nice little back and forth between 503JM, and I believe there's one other Oregon fan in the live chat and a couple Buckeye fans. Of course, Ohio State is on that series. Going back to the 80s, I remember them playing twice in the 80s, and the Buckeyes won both of those games pretty handily. One game was like 24-14. The other game was 31-6. And then we speed up to the 2010 Rose Bowl. Oregon was a 5-point favorite. Big Ten champions, Pac-12 champions, facing off at the Rose Bowl. And I was intrigued both times, both in the 2010 Rose Bowl and the 2014-15 National Championship game, in which Oregon, I believe, was a 5-point favorite in both games. And why that was, I just didn't see it. And that came to fruition. Ohio State was clearly the better team. Certainly in the national championship game, they were the much better team. In the Rose Bowl, it was a competitive game, but they were decidedly the better team. It did not go down to the wire. They won the game by 9 points. My thought was, all you hear, I think this is this is a theory that's gone by the wayside at this point. But at that point, we heard a ton about Oregon's speed. Oregon's speed, both in regards to the players on the field and their speed, their foot speed, and also the speed of the offense. Running so many plays, at a high rate, so many plays per game, so many plays run in a matter of seconds that the defense would get worn out. That certainly was the case. That certainly was the case with a lot of teams. But I would, and this isn't just the best measure of two teams, but I think it's a good measure. Let's look at these two teams and look at the rosters and see who is going to be playing and playing well in the NFL in 5 years. And there was never a question between the 2009 Oregon Ducks and the 2009 Ohio State Buckeyes, or the 2014 Ducks and the 2014 Buckeyes, which team had more NFL players? Not even close. Somebody do that homework for us. Go back to the 2014 Oregon roster and Ohio State roster and add up the NFL players. All credit due and given to Oregon for winning the Rose Bowl, but anybody with an objective eye understands that a lot of things went right for Oregon to win that game. It took a final drive in which, again, to Oregon's credit, they milked the clock and ran out the clock and ran through a couple first downs and posted a few first downs that kept the ball in their possession and ended the game. So I'm crediting Oregon for doing that. They had a 1-point lead. They needed to keep the ball, and against a physical defense, a really good defense, one of the 10 to 15 best defenses in the nation, and I'm not talking statistically, I'm talking in actuality, they moved the ball, moved the chains, and kept the ball and run out the clock and won the game. But before that drive, Oregon, with an NFL quarterback and with weapons at wide receiver and a very capable running back in C.J. Verdell, had less than 200 yards of total offense. And were gifted a touchdown by the Wisconsin punter, just flat out dropping the ball. Anytime turnovers come into play to decide a football game, I think you need to analyze the turnovers. There are turnovers that are gifts. Okay. Balls thrown, receiver, ball would hit him right in the face mask, tips the ball up in the air. The safety's just standing there. Boom, picked off. That's a gift. Yes, the safety caught the ball. He could have dropped the ball, but that's a gift. When the punter drops the snap, that's a gift. Now, when a defensive end whips the left tackle, strip sacks the quarterback, knocks it out of his hands, that's a forced fumble. When a defensive player strips the ball out of the hands of a running back or wide receiver, that's a forced play. When a corner breaks on the ball's thrown well, thrown on time, and the corner just beats the wide receiver to the spot or cuts him off and makes a play, that is a forced turnover. That is a play by the defense. Talk about Michigan again. That would be Michigan. Let's talk about Michigan again. That was funny. Kyle, it shows the South is like no other. Florida State, Florida, and Miami. Dale, thinking Big Ten may be having a down year from last year. A lot of big names went to the NFL. We would have to compare this year's NFL draft to previous year's NFL draft and the names going to the NFL. I can't really make that comparison because I would need to see the data. Anytime there's a statement made like that, I got to see data. McD knows this. He calls me all the time about trap games. This is a trap game. What's the other term that's thrown around? This is a trap game, and this is a, yeah. I'm not saying there's no such thing as a trap game. I'm just saying that for it to be proven to me that it matters, somebody would have to show me data. They would have to define what is a trap game. So I know what a trap game is. A trap game is basically when you play an inferior team in between playing two really good teams. So you're coming off a difficult game against a good team, and you're looking ahead to another difficult game against a good team, and you're playing a mediocre, bad team in the middle. That's a trap game. We all know the definition, but you would have to define, if you're going to run the metrics on whether that truly exists. We know that it exists. There are bad teams that are scheduled in between two good teams, but does it matter? None of us know. We assume, we say, oh, that's a trap game, but we don't know if it matters. There's been no data collected to show us that it has mattered, that good teams have lost to marginal teams on a fairly consistent basis because it was a trap game. That's just like I've got a friend who has made the comment in the NFL that, well, division games are closer than other games. That just because two teams play in the same division, therefore they're rivals, that they play closer games in division games. That even if a bad team is playing a good team in a division in the NFL, well, it's a division game, so it's going to be a close game. It's a division game. Maybe. Has anybody proven this? Has anybody run the numbers? If somebody wants to prove to me, oh, the average NFL game, the point differential is this, but in division games it's that, then I would be happy to say, you know what, your theory's correct. It's a division game. But until somebody shows me that, doesn't mean anything. 503JM would like us to talk about week 2. We will at some point. We will. I'll do a big preview. I will do multiple previews. I will bring on the Ohio State folks to talk Oregon. I'll bring on the Oregon folks to talk Ohio State. And yes, I will have my analysis of the game. We've got so much to talk about before that. And I can't give you a personal breakdown on that game. Justin Herbert's gone. Tyler Shook is most likely going to be the Oregon quarterback. We know that he has plenty of talent to play the position. Is he going to be good enough for that game? And from everything I hear, he's going to be in a competition this August for the job. Now, his job was probably made a little bit easier by not playing in the spring. His preparation for the season was made more difficult, but the likelihood that he will be the starter week 1 for Oregon, the probability went up because he didn't have to compete in the spring, and he's the likely starter. So he has less competition or less time for the other players to catch up. But based on what I hear from our last Oregon conversation is we've got 4 quarterbacks in play at Oregon. 3 very strong candidates, and Tyler Shook would be the favorite to win the job. Kyle lets us know, hit that like button. Thank you, Kyle. Got a call coming in.
The call will start at the beep.
Hey, everyone. Good to see you. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is Chris.
Hey, Chris. What's going on tonight?
I just wanted to call and put the scenario. I've heard we may have a shortened season due to the thing that we can't say, I guess, on YouTube. I know they're cracking down on you saying anything about it, but if we have a shortened season, I've heard talk of there possibly being just conference schedules, shorten it to conference games. And someone brought up the fact of what would happen to the independent teams like Notre Dame, BYU, in a scenario like that. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts as to what they may do in something like this, if something like that were to happen.
I think, to be fair to those teams, let's say, okay, so the conference seasons are obviously 8 and 9 games depending on the conference. Let's say we go to an 8-game season. This would take a lot of logistics to figure out. But the fair thing to do would be to play, let's say, a 6-game conference season and an 8-game season. And you would have 2 non-conference games, and that would bring the group of 5 and keep their games in play with the Power 5 and Notre Dame, BYU, and the rest of the independents. But that would be a scheduling nightmare. They would have to start working on that today to try to figure out how to get that figured out. And they would be scheduling games that probably haven't been scheduled yet, if you follow me, to make it work, to make the numbers work. But that would be the fairest way to do it that I can think of off the top of my head if there's only going to be an 8-game season. But if they play only conference games, then obviously Notre Dame, for example, would have to play the other independents, which there's only 4 of them, and none of them are any good besides BYU being decent. And they would play a group of 5 schedule. So Notre Dame would have to go find games to play. I just don't know how that would work. I don't think you can eliminate teams from a season. I've heard the same thing, Chris, but I'm trying to think of who has said this. Do they have any authority? I don't think they do. I think it's speculating.
This is just talk on on shows, saying postulating what would happen and assuming that, hey, look, if we had a shortened season, that we'd probably do the conference games or have the conference games played, cancel all of the non-conference, and then what some of the people were saying is, well, hey, look, not all of the non-conference games are in the beginning of the season, and in a neat 3 or 4 game setup here. Some have non-conference games towards the end of the year, like Florida State and Florida, and there's other teams around that have that kind of thing. So I was thinking, like, wow, you could have basically a lost season for Notre Dame, and I wonder if that would be a catalyst for them to join the ACC finally.
I might be wrong, Chris, but I can't imagine a scenario in which the NCAA and the various conference commissioners would determine that we're going to play a season and exclude 5 or 6 teams in the Power 5. I don't see that happening, especially since Notre Dame has ties to the ACC. They would put so much pressure on the ACC since they are a member of the ACC and the other sports and also have a 5-game contract each year with the ACC. I can't imagine them leaving Notre Dame out of a football season.
Yeah, I couldn't either. That was the thing, but I was trying to figure out how that would work. Would they be in the coastal? I mean, like, where would they put them within the division? I believe it's even teams on both sides. So how would that even work? How would you? They already have how many games do they play against the ACC a year? About 4.
5.
So they would need to add about 3 more games then.
Well, they would have to add 3 more games, but then you've got 3 other teams that would be playing 9-game ACC seasons. They would all be playing a different amount of games.
Okay, yeah. I mean, for this 1 year, if something like that were to happen, it would be a real mess, and that's just for Notre Dame. Like for example, BYU, I don't know what they would do.
Yeah, and you've got other independents that, even though most of college football nation could care less about, like New Mexico State and UMass, Liberty, and those teams, even though most of us don't necessarily care or give them much notice, they are Notre Dame and BYU. They're independents that have a schedule. I don't see that happening. I might be wrong, where the conferences would just say, screw everybody else, you should be in a conference, and would just play their conference season. But I don't think that's going to happen. Now that would be the easiest thing, and maybe it'll get down to a logistics issue where they say, how in the world can we accommodate a team with a schedule that's playing all these other games? Yeah, I just, I guess, yeah, I just don't know how that would play out. That they would completely leave a number of schools out of competition that would lose. I just read an article today about how much money is going to be lost if there's how much money's already been lost by not having spring sports in the NCAA tournaments. But how much projected money would be lost not having a college football season, they don't even want to think about, because they're looking at just it tearing up their complete financial outlook for these conferences for years and years and years to come.
Yeah, it's a nightmare scenario all around. The other thing I wanted to ask is, thinking about this and thinking about how, because of the way we have things set up at this time, what do you think? How do you feel as far as how the last realignment in college football, how that actually did for most teams? I mean, do you think the teams actually ended up being in a better situation, on average, than if we didn't have conference realignment? Or, was it a good thing or was it a bad thing?
Well, it depends what you're talking about. Are you talking about Rutgers and Maryland in the Big Ten? Are you talking about Nebraska? Are we talking about Texas A&M and Missouri? Are we talking about all the teams that left independent status and joined the ACC?
Yeah, because, like, for example, Nebraska lost a lot of their traditional rivalries that they had before. But I know financially it was good for a lot of teams. It was good for, a lot of leagues. I guess the SEC, made a lot more money bringing in Texas A&M and so forth. But I was thinking, beyond the money aspect, just as far as competitive balance in the leagues and so forth, like I kind of look at it right now, and going into most years, we could basically pick at least 3 of the 4 teams that are going to be in, and most people, would probably pick, Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, and of course, Oklahoma's been a team that's been there. But beyond that, I kind of feel as though competition-wise, I don't know if those teams step forward or the other teams step back. I feel as though, other than the SEC, there's not most of the leagues aren't competitive really, and I don't know if it's a better product today. I don't, when I was a kid, I remember Syracuse and Donovan McNabb were good, and you had all over the country. You had places where you had pockets of good football and interest in that area, and I feel like the sport's probably bigger than ever, but it seems to be southern situated now, and I feel overall, as far as the health of the sport, yeah, there's plenty of money and people are doing well, but I kind of feel as though I don't feel like anything can happen any Saturday. Kind of feel as though the teams that are going to win before they even play. It's like there's just each team has maybe 1 or 2 games a year where it's a toss-up, really a toss-up, and you're there for those games. But other than that, it's not as competitive as it used to be for me.
Okay. So, Chris, I'm right there with you. So, many people have argued that with the proliferation of TV, meaning if we rewound 35 years and went back to 1985, there were a lot of games on TV in 1985, but not everybody was on TV all the time. You basically had the big teams were on ABC and CBS every Saturday, and ESPN had some games on, but you didn't have all these regional networks, and you didn't have ESPNU and ESPN2 and on and on and on, the SEC network and the ACC network. And so the big schools, so you would have thought that there would be a lockdown on how many teams would win a national championship or compete for a national championship. Well, we could go through in any year in the 1980s in terms of not who just won the national championship, but who had a legitimate shot. And there were all sorts of teams that had shots at national championships. You could name 3 or 4 teams in the SEC, 3 or 4 teams in the Big Ten. Florida State, Miami, on and on and on, USC in the Pac-12, on and on and on, teams that competed for national championships, Oklahoma, Texas, Nebraska, etc. Now, ironically, everybody gets to be on TV, so apparently recruiting's supposed to be, I've heard this argument made by certain people, but it's not come to fruition that recruiting to smaller schools should be easier because you can sell these kids on being on TV. But if anything, like you just stated, I've made the complaint going into the college football season for the past few years. I've said, I love this sport on the field. It's better than any sport. It's great, the pageantry, the tradition, the action on the field. But we know we're about 90-some% certain Oklahoma's going to win the Big 12. Same thing in the Big 10 with Ohio State. Same thing to the nth degree with Clemson in the ACC, and the SEC's pretty much come down to Alabama and Georgia, and now LSU broke through last year, but it's been an Alabama-Georgia conference, and mostly Alabama since the playoff, and that's been the playoff. And a couple other teams have snuck in, but they've not won a game, and those are the 4 or 5 teams that rule the college football playoff, and we've had the thing now for 6 years, and it's not changing. So I don't remember your original question, but certainly what you just stated is the truth.
Yeah, I enjoy college football now. Then I just feel, like you're saying, like there were so many different teams. When you can think back about, back in the different times. I remember when BYU was a juggernaut. I remember. Of course, all of the teams from Florida taking their turns, in the 80s into the 90s. There was a time when, I don't know if the younger people listening, Alabama was terrible. There was so much movement. You had USC being dominant, Texas. There was. It just didn't feel like a sport that was just dominated by a few. It kind of feels as though when I look at the leagues now, you have two conferences that really separate themselves above the rest, and then the other 3 conferences to me are like if you took the top group of 5 teams and you put them in, they would probably, like if you took the American Conference teams and you shuffle them in, you wouldn't see much difference between like the Pitts and the Virginia Tech. I remember when Virginia Tech was more dominant. It seems as though a lot of the Power 5 schools that were more dominant in the 80s and 90s seem to have regressed to a level where you have the upper echelon, the elite teams. You have the set of teams right beyond that, and then you have a lot of teams in the mid to lower parts of the conferences that are basically like a high-end group of 5 type of team.
Well, we could have said that 35 years ago as well. If we went back to 1985, we could have said the same thing about the bottom of all these leagues. The difference is that we just named 5 or 6 teams that rule college football right now, whereas back, if again, pick your year in the 1980s, and if you said you could go through Street and Smith and Athlons and all the major publications, and they were all over the place in regards to who the top 10 was and who's going to win a national championship. You could pick up all different types of magazines, and they would say, between Alabama, Tennessee, LSU, Florida, in the SEC, Auburn as well, of course, between Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, Penn State a little later when they joined in '93, but Penn State is an independent, Florida, Florida State, Miami, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, on and on, USC, Notre Dame. All these teams were considered top 10 to 15 teams in the country, and you would see them mixed all over these polls because there was not a consensus. Now, if you pick up a preseason magazine over the last 5 years and it doesn't have Clemson, Alabama, or Ohio State winning the national championship, I don't know who it has winning. Maybe Georgia has been picked by some, but 3 or 4 teams are the only teams that you're ever going to see at number 1 in a preseason magazine over the last 5 years.
Yeah. Well, the last question I had is what you thought as far as in the ACC this year, if you thought of anybody that could possibly give Clemson a challenge this year.
The team that has the most talent in their division is, of course, Florida State, but I don't think they're prepared. And I think this pandemic that we're facing right now is certainly going to hurt first-year head coaches. So that's the situation Florida State's in with Mike Norvell. So it's going to be more difficult for him to get ready for this season. But they're not ready for that anyway. They need to get to 8 wins before they start thinking about Clemson. In the Coastal Division, I'm intrigued by North Carolina. I've cut a couple videos running down their personnel for 2020 with their top 3 wide receivers back, both running backs back. Sam Howell, quarterback, after 38 touchdowns as a true freshman. Mac Brown's recruiting out of his mind, so even some of this 2020 class that he brought in could be a factor. And most of their productivity on defense, most of their tackles for loss, sacks, interceptions are back that North Carolina is going to be. And they're going to have faced tougher teams non-conference than they will in the ACC after they play UCF and Auburn in September. So I think they're extremely interesting. And, of course, Miami's got the best talent on the roster in the division, but got a lot more faith in Mac Brown in North Carolina.
All right, Mark. Thanks, man. It was good talking to you.
All right, Chris, I guess I didn't get around to your question about conference realignment, but I will address that when we get off the phone here. But thanks so much for the call.
All right. Thanks, man.
So, Chris, if you're listening, my thoughts about conference realignment, and I apologize, I forgot what your question was, but I posted a video a couple years ago in which I realigned college football into 6 power conferences, 72 teams, so 12 teams in each conference. So every conference would have the same number of teams, in which they should have the same number of teams. And I'll have to repost that video or recut that video because I think it made sense. I put teams that belong to the ACC in the ACC. I put teams back in the Big Ten that belong in the Big Ten, and so forth. And we had 12 teams in each conference, and we built 6 conferences, so I reestablished the Big East as well. So we might have to go back at that. But to address Chris's question, has college football expansion been good? I would say for Nebraska, competitively on the field, it's not been good. They've lost their recruiting footprint that has gone down into Oklahoma and Texas. Now that they're a member of the Big Ten, they've been kind of lost from a recruiting standpoint. Financially, I don't know the numbers, but My educated guess is that it's been good for Nebraska since the Big Ten brings in a lot more money than the Big 12. The SEC and the Big Ten own the sport financially in regards to TV ratings, which transition right into financial figures. For Maryland and Rutgers, much like Nebraska, it has been good for them financially, but it's not been good for the Big Ten from a football perspective. And football rules, and football is the reason these expansions happen. And I know Big East basketball fans in particular have been upset about what has been routinely the best league in the country, along with the ACC, being torn to shreds in favor of football. And so even schools that are known for basketball, as most of the Big East was, football is still financially dominant for most schools, not everyone, but almost every school. Even schools you would consider basketball schools, football still brings in bigger numbers. So the decisions were made with football in mind, and that's what blew up the Big East. So Maryland and Rutgers have obviously not been good additions to the Big Ten. They're awful. They don't add anything. They don't add viewers. They don't add attendance figures. They're just a drain on the Big Ten. I don't know what studies the Big Ten was conducting to lead it to believe that they would grab some kind of stranglehold of New York City and the Beltway of Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, because those people, by and large, don't care about Rutgers and Maryland football. Do any of them? Yes, there are Rutgers football fans in New York City, but less of them than Notre Dame, Michigan, and Ohio State fans, and Penn State fans. Texas A&M and Missouri, good financially for those schools, but again, competitively on the field, it's been difficult for. They've competed well enough. They've been better than average in the SEC. Actually, Missouri's accounted for itself better than I thought they would at the time in the SEC. Their first season in the SEC in 2012 was rough. I know that they only went 2-6, so it wasn't a complete disaster, but they looked overmatched. And Gary Pinkel made it work, took advantage of a weak SEC East, the East being down, Florida being down, Georgia being decent, but generally the East being down, South Carolina coming off a big run of 11-win seasons being down, and Mizzou, of course, won the East in 13 and 14. And Texas A&M's they've been successful off the field. The stadium's packed, as it was when they played in the Big 12. The money's coming in, hand over fist, playing in the SEC, playing with that TV contract, playing with SEC network money and CBS money. And the recruiting's been outstanding for both Kevin Sumlin and now Jimbo Fisher. They just haven't translated that to winning on the field, except for the 11-2 Cotton Bowl winning Johnny Manziel Heisman Trophy winning season, the first year in the SEC. Dale asks, will Trey Sermon be the best grad transfer this year? He will most likely not necessarily just be the best, but the best with the most impact for the team that has a championship run in them. So somebody else could be better, and I'm not in a position to give you names right now. I don't have numbers and names in front of me, but somebody else may be better or more of a star for their particular team, but it could be for a 7-5 team. But for a team that's primed to go to the college football playoff, that needs help at that position, he could be more impactful in a big spot for a team that needs it, that is going to impact the championship race than anybody. That appears to be the case. Oregon, Mark, we beat down Wisconsin every time. Okay, let's define beat down. You slipped by Wisconsin twice. Every time. It's not like you play them every year. So all respect to Oregon and Mario Cristobal. He's doing an outstanding job. He has knocked off USC as the gold standard in the Pac-12, and obviously before that, Chris Peterson had taken Washington and supplanted USC. If we were having this discussion last year or the year before, I would say Washington is the best program in the Pac-12. I no longer say that. I now say Oregon is the best program in the Pac-12. Understand that Oregon was definitely the best team in the Pac-12 last year. Okay, let's understand this. Let's put this into context. Oregon was no doubt the best team in the Pac-12. Sure, they lost a game in the Pac-12, but they beat the best team in the South handily, and they beat everybody of consequence in the North. Their loss was against Arizona State, so they beat everybody in the North in the better division. They were the best team. Wisconsin was not the best team in the Big Ten. They lost by 31 and 13 to the best team in the Big Ten. And they weren't necessarily the second best team in the Big Ten. There's an argument that Wisconsin was the second best team in the Big Ten. There could be an argument that they were the third best team in the Big Ten. There could be an argument that by the end of the season, they might have been the fourth best team in the Big Ten. They weren't the best team in the Big Ten, and a shaky selection as second best in the Big Ten. So Oregon was not beating the best team in the Big Ten. They were maybe beating the second or third or fourth best team in the Big Ten, and they beat them by 1 point. Credit the win. Fair and square, result on the field. But beating a team by 1 point in a game that was somewhat marred by controversial calls at the end and turnovers doesn't show that you're the better team. I was not convinced that Oregon was better than Wisconsin. I would say they're rough. When you play a 28-27 game in a Rose Bowl, that just basically shows they won the game. Let's credit them. They should be ranked higher. They are certainly given credit as Rose Bowl champions. But if we're evaluating who's the better team after watching that game, I don't know. I don't know. And so the term beat down, if that's a beat down, 28-27, down to the wire, and the previous time was in the Rose Bowl in 2012, where Russell Wilson was throwing the ball in the end zone to tie the game. Again, that is not a beat down. 45-7, that's a beat down. 35-10, I'll give you beat down. Yeah, one possession game that comes down to the last second on 2 occasions. That's not a beat down. You won the games, not a beat down. You basically just showed we won the game. We should be credited for the Rose Bowl championship. We won the game, but we didn't show that we were a better team. It's not like there's no doubt they could have played the next day and Wisconsin could have beaten them. Who knows? MSU #1 fan is asking, how will Michigan State do this year? Well, watch my preview of Michigan State's schedule, my record projection and preview. MSU #1 fan, brace yourself. You may not like it. That's not my final prediction, but I think Mel Tucker and Michigan State are in a difficult place. What Mark D'Antonio accomplished at Michigan State for the first half of his tenure there should be celebrated and embraced. He did such a good job there that most of us think of Michigan State as, even after having 4 generally marginal seasons since going to the college football playoff, most of us, when we think Michigan State, we think Big Ten contender, top 15 team program. That's generally, until I catch myself, That's how I think of Michigan State because of what Mark D'Antonio accomplished since he took over in 2007. Michigan State football through the ages, through the decades and generations, has been marginal. I, of course, don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I guarantee that if you took Michigan State football from any time in the 70s, pick your year, and added up the records between 1970 whatever, all the way through to Mark D'Antonio's first year, added up their records, I guarantee I will be within a point or two of 55% winning percentage. They've been marginal. They had 2 outstanding seasons, winning the Rose Bowl in 87, winning the Citrus Bowl in 99 over Florida, and finishing in the top 10 those 2 years. Those are the only 2 years out of 40 years that Michigan State finished in the top 10 in the nation. Until Mark D'Antonio. He finished in the top 10 in, 2010, 2011, 13, 14, 15, 4 or 5 times he finished in the top 10. Won the Rose Bowl, won the Cotton Bowl, beat Georgia in an Outback Bowl, won 3 Big Ten championships. That's not been Michigan State football. And now he wasn't able to maintain that status. And they've gone 3-9, 10-3, 7-6, 7-6. And during much of that time, they played against a Big Ten where the league was in one division, one conference. Now he's packed in with Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. And they are, put them on a line with Indiana. Right now, until I see different, I'm going to consider Michigan State to be Indiana and Purdue. Uh, 503JM says, we have the best secondary, no gifts, catch up. We will analyze your secondary at some point. No, the Oregon team in 2019 was not better than the 2014 team. Yeah, the schedule is difficult, David, for Michigan State. Playing Miami and BYU, which are toss-up games. But they could be 0-2. They could go 1-2. They've got Toledo. They could go 1-2 non-conference. Michigan, yeah, the Big Ten Eastern Division. Plus, they've got, I'm trying to think of their Western Division teams they play. I think they've got, I don't even want to say because I don't remember. I don't remember. MSU #1 fan, will Michigan State beat Ohio State? Sometime in the future, yes. Sometime in the future. Sometime in the next 20 years, I would guess yes. In 2020, we would have a major shock to all of our systems if Michigan State beat Ohio State. .503JM, I got to say, you're a good sport. I've got nothing against Oregon. I'm just stating facts and putting things in perspective. Just putting things in perspective. All credit due to Oregon. If we had to make a call between whether Oregon was the better team last year than Wisconsin, the result on the field says, yes, they were a better team. But in all actuality, we know that if two teams play that are very close in talent and in performance, that if they play, that only one team can win. It's not like it's a baseball series. And if those teams played a 7-game series, it probably would be 4-3, one or the other. And anybody who doesn't have that evaluation is probably not paying attention, or they're extremely biased. Sam is asking, Mark Rogers, in your opinion, will Tennessee be in the national championship and playoff what year, sir? Well, what Jeremy Pruitt was able to put together over the second half of last season was pretty impressive, considering the 1-4 start. After they melted down in the final couple minutes against BYU and gave up that long pass, with the blown coverage that sent them to 0-2 after losing to Georgia State, I thought they were in real trouble. I thought he was in real trouble. But he's known for his recruiting. He is a recruiting guru. That's why he was brought there. He always recruited well in the SEC, and he knows the SEC, and you can see the recruiting rankings and what he's doing on that. And he's getting back they've got the Cade Mays transfer from Georgia, and Trey Smith is coming back. So the offensive line could be better at Tennessee than it's been in years. Jared Garantano is not necessarily going to be the starter. He's the front runner. I like Tennessee this year. I don't believe they have any big non-conference games. Don't think so. Mickey reminding everyone to hit the like button. So yes, I believe in Jeremy Pruitt. Whether that's going to be enough eventually to overtake Georgia and Florida. If you put Tennessee, even right now in the ACC Coastal, I'm not going to say that they're going to win for sure, but you would have an argument that Tennessee might be the favorite. Or in the Pac-12 South, but they've got to deal with Georgia and Florida, and they still haven't necessarily separated themselves. Well, they haven't from Kentucky. And so there's a lot more work for Jeremy Pruitt to accomplish. One recruiting class doesn't bail you out. You need layer after layer after layer after layer. All right, I will take one more call if Sam Bell in particular would like to call in. 860-325-3687. That's 860-325-3687. Anybody call in, but Sam was asking. So there it is. We've got 50 on the line, which means we probably had 150 go through the live stream tonight thus far. If you're not subscribed, why not? Why not? Subscribe, turn on the bell for the notifications, and you know when we're going live. And when you shop Amazon, or anybody in the household who's responsible for the shopping, that does the shopping, get the link in the hands of the person that does the shopping. It's the same shopping experience. Please help us build the channel. And of course, the super chat is on. True. All right. I don't see anything else in the chat. Got Cheslaw, Nicodem. Cheslaw, I've never seen your handle before, so everyone knows what's coming, right? Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Cheslaw, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Welcome. Would love to know how long you've been watching and who you root for. And again, going once, going twice, going 3 times, and somebody beat me to the punch.
Press 1 to start the call or 2 to decline. The call will start at the beep.
All right, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. This is Edward.
Hey, Edward. How are you?
Doing well. I had a question about the playoff structure. And let me paint this scene first. So in the NFL, you cannot have 2 NFC teams play in the Super Bowl, nor can you have 2 AFC teams play in the Super Bowl, even though there had clearly been years that you had 2 of the best teams in the NFC, or you had 2 of the best teams both in the AFC.
Sure.
So in college, it's different. You can actually have 2 teams from the same conference play in the national championship, even though one of those teams didn't even win their own championship game, if you're following me. So, for example, you could have an Alabama and Georgia play in the national championship, and they're both in the same conference, or the SEC.
Sure.
So some could argue, like I remember one year in particular, a lot of people felt that, I think it was LSU and Alabama, and a lot of people felt like Ohio State should have been playing Alabama. But because this is done by a voting committee, it wound up being, like an LSU Alabama. I think that's who it was. And most people felt like, or a lot of people felt like it should have been Ohio State in there.
So the season
So my question,
you're referring to 2011. Alabama and LSU played during the regular season. LSU won the regular season game, therefore they won the division. Therefore, Alabama did not play in its own conference championship game. But both teams were with 1 loss. Actually, LSU was undefeated. Alabama had the 1 loss to LSU. It was Oklahoma State who had 1 loss to Iowa State and won the Big 12 Conference, and the argument was made that they only had 1 loss like Alabama, and they won their conference. Therefore, it should have been, and LSU and Alabama already played. Therefore, people argued, as did I, that LSU and Oklahoma State should have been the national championship game in 2011.
That's exactly what I'm referring to. So I feel that it should be this way. I think that 2 teams from the same conference should not be allowed to play in the national championship, even if they are the 2 best teams. In other words, going back to the NFL reference, if you have, I think there was one year, there's been several years that the 2 best teams were in the NFC, but they couldn't play in the Super Bowl. You could not have that matchup. It's impossible.
But they do play in the
and I kind of feel like
game.
Sure. Yeah.
You do have
right.
2 teams from the same division
right.
playing the conference championship game.
Yeah, but I just feel like it would be more interesting if in the college football, the national championship had to be 2 different conferences representing the game. If you're following me.
Oh, I follow you completely. We have a 14 playoff. We have 5 major conferences. And so there should not be 2 teams from the same conference in the playoff.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's well, maybe that's possible in the playoff. I'm not thinking about it that way. But I'm talking about the final game, the actual national championship game.
then you would have to rig it so those two teams always played in the first round.
Maybe I didn't think this all the way through. That is interesting. Yeah, because okay.
So you would have
Yeah, you're right.
You would have to have
you would have to change the structure of it. Yeah, you're right. So actually, I guess the way the structure of the playoff system works, you would have to allow the possibility for two teams from the same conference to play each other in the final game.
Well, not necessarily, but you would have to contrive the seedings. So for right now, as you know, there's a playoff selection committee. They are charged with selecting the 4 best teams, what they consider to be the 4 best teams. Those teams generally win conference championships, but there have been 2 occasions in which teams did not win a conference championship and were still selected for the playoff. That would be Ohio State in 2016 and Alabama in 2017. And some people would include Notre Dame that can't win a conference. They're not in a conference. But the playoff committee looks strongly at conference champions, but they're not tied to it. Therefore, they are just charged with selecting what they believe to be the 4 best teams in the country. So in 2017, they selected 2 teams from the SEC. Both those teams, Alabama and Georgia, ended up winning their playoff games. Therefore, they met in the national championship game. So for it to play out the way you're recommending, as I take it, that there could be 2 teams from the same conference selected for the 4-team playoff, but to ensure that they don't play in the championship game, you would have to make sure that they meet in the first round.
Correct. Yeah, that would work. They would have to play each other in the first round.
But you would have to fix the seedings. So the playoff committee selects the teams and seeds them 1 through 4 based on whom they believe has deserved and earned the number 1 ranking, the 2, the 3, and the 4. But if, let's say, a team was clearly number 1 and a team from the same conference was clearly number 4, the committee would have to fix the seedings inappropriately to ensure that they played in the first game.
Yeah, that's the way I could see it working. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's your opinion? Do you think that's a bad idea, or do you think, I don't know? It seems like it would make it a little bit more. But then I understand that you could also have scenarios where you're going to have absolute blowouts. So I don't know. But I just think it would be interesting if you had, rather if you didn't have 2 SEC teams in the final game, if they could meet earlier than that, and the final 2 in the national championship were representing, say, the Big Ten was representing, and then the SEC was representing 1 team, that type of scenario. I don't know. It's just my opinion, and I think it'd be interesting. But I think the system, the way it is good, but it's far from perfect, And then you have another scenario, which I guess this has to do with the seeding. Basically, didn't last year you had a number 1 LSU playing a number 4 seed, I think Oklahoma, and it was just an almost unwatchable game. If I'm remembering that correctly.
Absolutely. There's not a whole lot you can do about that.
Yeah, I guess not.
There were 3 teams that clearly belonged in the playoff because they were undefeated and virtually unchallenged the whole season. And then you had a 4th team that was a pretty clear choice because they were the only team to win a conference, a major conference, with only 1 loss. So that's why Oklahoma received the 4th position.
Right, yeah. Well, I don't know, but then I saw a chart that this is what something like an 8 seed playoff scenario would look like, and it was ridiculous. I mean, it was it was like, no, this would not work in college. I can see how it works in the pros, but not in college. So I guess the system is probably about as good as it can be, but I don't know.
I would
that
like
was
to
it.
see
That
an
was just
18 playoff. I'm a proponent of an 18 playoff because it would include all the conference champions.
Yeah, and it would also extend it a little bit. Wouldn't it add an extra game, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, that would be pretty cool. And finally, I think you may have done a video, something about how you think an 8-seed playoff would work. Have you done a video about that?
Yeah, it's been a while. So I think there's only two ways to solve this. One in which you either need to include the group of 5 and give them a place at the table, or you send a message to the group of 5 and you split the Power 5 and the group of 5, and you tell the group of 5, you are simply not good enough to participate in our championship. Go play your own championship or decide whatever you'd like to. We are making this strictly a Power 5 championship. But right now, there is this tease of the group of 5 that they actually have a chance to play in the national championship. But we've seen undefeated teams in the group of 5. They have no chance of playing in the national championship. Therefore, why even patronize them? So
you might be referring to Central Florida or something like that.
Central Florida.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know what more they could possibly have done to deserve a spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think people sometimes misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they were one of the 4 best teams, but I'm saying that they earned a spot, and I don't know what else they could have done. So if you go undefeated, what else can be done?
Yeah, not just undefeated, but clearly undefeated. I mean, like there's no real close games.
Yeah, no close games, and undefeated when there were teams with losses when the rest of the field had losses. Now, if there were 4 Power 5 teams that were undefeated, and then you had UCF undefeated, I can understand that. But if that wasn't a case in which there was going to be a group of 5 team make the playoff, then I don't know when that's going to happen. So they need to go play their own championship, or they need to be given 1 spot out of 8, guaranteed.
Okay, yeah, I could see that if they had. And of course, there's some teams that might be a little bit nervous about something like that, but particularly like with them beating Auburn, who had lost to, who had beaten, Georgia and Alabama back-to-back games, and they turned around and beat Auburn. Yeah, I think they deserve a chance in the playoffs, but the way the system is structured, it's impossible.
Well, I appreciate the call.
Yeah, I do too. I thank you for taking my call. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too.
Matt, thank you so much for the contribution on the Super Chat. You got the vision. We are doing our best to blow this up and make this as good as it possibly can be. Well, we hope will one day be. Some days it is. Not every day. Some days we reach our goal, our objective, the best debate, discussion, and analysis in college football.
Press 1 to start the call or 2 to decline. The call will start at the beep.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports 4. How are you doing?
Hey, McD. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I like the background, the new background. I like it.
Well, thank you. I got to admit, I don't care for it. I'm still
I heard that.
with it.
Yeah,
I caught the first half hour of your show, and then I had to go off and do something. But I'm back now, and so I'll give you a call because I have a few questions and just want to get your idea on them.
Okay, what you got?
My first question is, I heard the two questions: what will I do or give up to get a full college football season? I have a PS4 and an Xbox One right in front of me. I'll be more than happy to give those up for a full college football season.
Okay.
So,
All right. Okay.
I mean, I personally think we will get a full season from August 29th till November 28th. So I'm not too concerned about that. It seems like everybody, just all levels, like from the doctors to the government, are saying June 1st, around that time they think it's going to be done with.
Let's also understand that
hopefully they're right.
let's understand that a few weeks ago, Easter was given as a target.
I didn't believe that. So I hope they're right. I mean, the doctors weren't saying Easter. I'm not going to really get into it, but the doctors weren't saying Easter, but the doctors are saying like June 1st. So I hope they're right. But that's my first. That's the first question. And your second question was, for any college football games, I get the tickets for free, so I don't have to really pay anything. Because people don't want to go to the Maryland games, and I just get the tickets for free. Some of them are even in the student section, so it's interesting. But overall, the only time I really had to pay for a ticket was recently. I had to pay $46 for a ticket. So, to a Wizards game, to an NBA game. So, I don't usually have to pay for college football games, at least for the Terps, because people give them out for free for some reason. But the few things I want to talk about, Mark, my first question is, do you think Florida is being overhyped?
Overhyped by who? Anytime I hear the term so-and-so is overrated, overhyped, underrated, I'm trying to determine from who.
There's a lot of people coming out there saying they think they're going to make the playoffs. And I think that's really overrating. I think they're going to be the same thing as last year. Get to a New Year's Six Bowl, probably come second in the East, and probably win that New Year's Six Bowl, honestly. I just don't think Florida has the Jimmies and Joes to go up against Georgia. I still think they're a year out from really being serious against Georgia. I know last year the score was 24-17, if I'm not mistaken, in Georgia's favor, but that game was a lot. It wasn't a 24-17 game. It was more like a 24-7 game. I think Florida scored like a last-second touchdown to make it 24-17, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right.
I
They scored late. Is Florida being overhyped? I think that Florida, until I see differently, based on having a good but not great quarterback, based on having really good recruiting classes but not elite recruiting classes, based on what Dan Mullen's shown us the first 2 years, which has been that he can certainly run a football program and a football team better than either Will Muschamp or Jim McElwain, that they're going to be very competitive, that I don't know who their other game is out of the SEC West. They, of course, play LSU as they do every year. It's Ole Miss?
Ole Miss on the road. I think that could be a tricky game because I think they're going to sneak up on somebody this year, Ole Miss. I think they're going to sneak up on somebody and pull off a big-time upset.
And Florida doesn't have a difficult non-conference game other than Florida State, correct? They don't play anybody.
They play.
I don't have it in. Actually, I do have it somewhere.
I want to say they play a group of 5 team, a decent group of 5 team. I have to look it up to tell you.
Yeah. Anyway.
But I can't remember. They play South Alabama, New Mexico State, and Eastern Washington.
So they don't. Okay.
Yeah, never mind with that.
So they've got to deal with Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, maybe a date against Ole Miss on the road. Those are the games. They've got about 4 games they need to be concerned with, and they need to win the East. So they probably need to win against Georgia, neutral field. Their season's going to come down to 1 game, and they've got a puncher's chance. I can understand why people are basically saying there's a new quarterback at Georgia. They've lost some of their wide receiver production. Florida's getting closer. Maybe Dan Mullen is a better in-game coach. Well, I think he definitely is a better in-game coach than Kirby Smart. So maybe Florida wins this game head-to-head, and they get to the playoff. It wouldn't surprise me. Georgia does have a better roster. You're right. They've got a decidedly better roster.
Yeah. Here's my problem with why people are overrating Florida. Georgia, I think, is going to open up that offense more this upcoming season with Newsman at quarterback to transfer out of Wake Forest and the new OC Moncton. And Florida, I'm going to be completely honest with this. I'm not going to say Dan Mullen's first year. I'm not going to count that because I didn't think that team was going to beat Georgia even if everything went right. That team was nowhere close to Georgia this past season, in my opinion. I mean, that score was 16-3 at the end of the third quarter. I mean, Florida was getting dominated. And I'm going to come out and say right now, I think Tennessee's pulling off the upset against Florida in Week 4 in Knoxville. And I know that's a bit bold to say because Florida has only lost like once since the mid-2000s against Tennessee. But I do think it's going to happen. Now, I do think Florida's the better team, but you're always going to lose a game you're not supposed to lose, and I think that's going to be the game that Florida is probably shouldn't lose, but they are.
Who's always going to lose a game they're supposed to lose?
Excuse me?
Everybody loses a game they're not supposed to lose?
Yeah.
Really?
For the most part.
Oh, for the most
part. Yeah, if you look,
for the most part.
If you look at...
All right, for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part. You do have a few undefeated teams that
I didn't know where Clemson, Ohio State, and LSU's losses were last year. Okay, for the most part.
For the most part.
All right.
If you look at, like, I give you many examples of that, but overall, I just see Florida losing 2 games again and being second in the East. They'll get to a New Year's Six Bowl, probably win it. But I just my big problem with Florida is I know you said Dan Mullen's a better in-game coach. I don't know if he's the better coach overall though than Kirby because he never won the SEC West, and he has shots to win the SEC West twice in my opinion, legit shots, and he didn't come through. He had that one very good year, and then they blew it against Bama and Ole Miss. Well, I'm not going to say they blew it against Bama, but they blew it against Ole Miss. And I just really think that Florida is a lot farther than what people think from Georgia. So I just want to get your opinion on that. Before I left, because I had to go take care of something, someone gave me a prediction for the Ohio State-Oregon game.
Mm-hmm.
Was it 31-28 Ohio State?
Yes.
I'll go 34-31 Ohio State. I think it's going to be by a field goal as well. I have to agree with what that caller was. I think it'll be a bit more high scoring, 34-31. Because Oregon, I think Oregon can lose that game. If they lose a close game and went through the Pac-12 and go 12-1, I think they're in the playoffs. Oregon.
So I'm reacquainting myself with this Georgia-Florida game from last year. I, of course, watched just about every play of the game. Georgia wins 24-17. Florida scored late. It was, as you mentioned, a 16-3 game going into the fourth quarter. Georgia was decidedly the better team, but Florida did have a puncher's chance. They did score with enough time that if they would have gotten a stop, they could have gotten the ball back. But again, they had to score to make it 24-17. It was 24-10. Georgia outgained them by 120 yards. And what I'm being reminded of, the big difference between these two teams, and I think it's still going to be the case this year, is that Florida hasn't recruited at an elite level along the offensive line and at running back. They could not move Georgia. They could not run the ball against them. They averaged 1.2 yards per carry in this game. Georgia couldn't just run it at will, but could run it well enough against Florida's front seven. That was the huge difference, is that I just think Georgia's defense is probably going to be even better this year. They are loaded on defense.
Absolutely. I'm not a Georgia fan.
Florida, to score points against Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not a Georgia fan. I'm not, for your viewers, I'm a Maryland Terps fan.
I know.
I'm an avid college football fan, but all these people coming out saying that Florida's going to go ahead and make the college football playoffs, better be careful, because I'm going to be honest with you as well. I don't think Florida and Tennessee, I don't think it's as big as a gap as people think as well. I think Tennessee is closer to Florida than what people give up or really think, because Tennessee, if you watch them that second half of the season, they just gutted out games. And I don't know if Florida has the capability of gutting out games every single week like Tennessee could.
Mm-hmm.
I would trust Tennessee in a close game. I would trust Tennessee right now over Florida.
Wait a minute. You would trust Tennessee over Florida to win a close game?
And from what I saw in the second half of the season, yes, I would.
Just because Tennessee beat a bunch of marginal teams?
If you watch Tennessee, they gutted out a lot of those games. They could have very easily lost a bunch of those games, and they gutted. Then they won all of them, even the Indiana game and the bowl game. They probably should have really lost that game against Indiana, but
so all
they found a way to win it. I'm telling you, they were a team that was finding ways to win games.
I get your point, McD, but all you're telling me is that Tennessee was scraping by the skin of their teeth against teams that Florida was beating by 3 touchdowns in the SEC East. That's what you're telling me.
I mean, basically, but I'm telling you, Tennessee, compared to Florida on close games, I would take Tennessee right now in a close game, in like a field goal game over Florida.
Tennessee still has serious issues in the passing game.
I know they do. And that's a big question mark with Tennessee, the passing game. That's the only thing for me preventing to pull the trigger for them coming in second in the East over Florida, the passing game. Because I think they'll set everywhere else. I think the defense is going to be possibly even better than Florida's, honestly. They won't be as good as Georgia, because Georgia's just more talented. But, I mean, I do think that Tennessee defense could be better than Florida's.
McD, can you see your screen right now?
Yeah.
Do you see what Matt's what his suggestion is?
Use the BCS rankings for 16 playoffs, top 2 get by.
You know
I used to think that, and I changed my mind. I used to think that, but I changed my mind to 18. But you got to pick the group of 5 as the top group of 5 as an AC. And I know the last caller kind of got into that, and you were talking about possibly having the group of 5 having a separate thing. I disagree with that. I think the group of 5 should be included, have the top group of 5 get the AC, and They could. It could be. They could win it all. I mean, look at UCF. UCF beat Auburn a few years ago in the Peach Bowl. I know Memphis lost. I know UCF lost 2 years ago, but it's been done before. A group of 5 teams. Boise State's another one that's beating some of these big boy schools. And I think Boise State could very well find themselves in that game again. Them, Memphis, UCF. And one of the other underrated games, non-conference games, North Carolina versus UCF. I think that's going to be a really good game.
Yep.
I think it's a Thursday night, week 1.
It's on my top 10 list.
It did make your top 10 list?
It's on my top 10 list.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's really another underrated game right there that I think you should keep an eye on. I'll make another bold prediction right now. I think North Carolina's beating Auburn in week 2.
Okay. I don't know if that's a bold prediction, but I'll take it. Okay.
And I just really feel like I hope we get all 12 games for each of the teams, but and hopefully we will. But I just want to really call up and talk about basically. I just don't think Florida is really deserves the hype. I don't think they're going to be in the college football playoffs, and we'll see what happens. But thanks for taking my call, Mark.
Thanks,
Go Terps.
So as soon as I pointed out Matt's comment that you see on the screen to McD knows exactly what I was talking about. We used to have debates concerning a 16 playoff, and McD knows better now because I convinced him that a 16 playoff. Matt, we appreciate the contribution. Thank you so much for the super chat. Now I've got to correct you on the 16 playoff. It doesn't work. It won't work. I will have to explain later, I guess, because somebody's calling in. All right. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. It's Michael Hope. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, Michael. I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Not too bad for Sunday night, Monday morning. Hey, got a quick question for you.
Yes.
With everything that's going on and stuff, I seen an interview the other night with Scott Van Brian. Well, I see snippets of it, but I think talking about the start of college football. When do you think the absolute drop dead start date they would have to be in order to get into camp to like get conditioning and stuff like that in order to get the season to have a full season?
Well, let's not underestimate what these teams are doing right now. These are well-oiled machines, and they understand what's at stake. So these coaches and these coaching staffs are running a lot of virtual drills and workout plans and nutrition plans with their players and getting them online on a daily basis via video, talking to them, running them through their workouts. And so from a standpoint of staying in shape, not in football shape, of course, but we're talking about staying in shape, running, lifting weights, doing all those things. They're generally able to do that and run them through their off-season program to stay in shape. These teams typically hit camp August 1st. We've missed spring practice. Some teams got in 3, 4, 5 workouts. Other teams got in nothing. So that's just going to be what it is. I would say that to have a full season, that to have some semblance of a practice schedule that's close to what they now have in play, meaning individual workouts and uncoached, non-structured or regulated coaching staff workouts that they have in June, that it would be best if what the president stated today about June 1st, things getting back to normal, would be able to be confirmed and then you get everybody on a plane and you get everyone together on June 15th, and let's say you let these kids get together for individual workouts and maybe give an abbreviated spring practice to these teams for maybe 2 weeks. You let the kids rest for a few weeks, you get back to a normal August camp. But even if that can't happen, as long as these coaching staffs have a couple weeks to prepare for August camp, which again, they can do all this virtually, I would like to hear the argument that it can't go all the way up until the first day of August for them to run a football camp, fall camp in August and prepare for a full season.
No, I was just wondering stuff like that, with everything shut down and stuff like that, and a lot of the athletes don't have access to gyms and stuff like that. Do you think it's a modified virtual workouts, or do you think it's a full-fledged?
Well, for individual workouts, it depends on what that particular athlete, each student athlete has available to them at home. I'm sure some of them can't go through the workout that they normally would. If that answers your
Another thing
question.
it does. Another thing I'm trying to figure out with all these, like with Purdue getting new defensive coordinators this year, and some schools getting new head coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. How do you think that's going to affect them as far as maybe like getting into the playbook and maybe seeing game film and stuff like that, or do you think they already got all the playbooks and stuff, especially with the incoming freshmen and stuff?
Any program with a new head coach, and a new head coach almost always means most of the coaching staff is different, is at a huge disadvantage. They have not had the time nor the face-to-face with the athletes to put in a structure, an organization, change terminology, culture, just practice regimen, what they expect, and that's all the nuts and bolts. That doesn't even take into account relationship building. The most important relationship that these student athletes have is typically with their position coach. And if you've got a new head coach, you typically have a new position coach, and those relationships are, I'm sure, being fostered virtually, but it doesn't come close and cannot replace face-to-face communication and working together. So those coaches at pick the institution that's got a new head coach on down the line are at a major disadvantage.
Yep. My last question I'm going to shoot in the call with is, how much better do you think Bob Diaco's is going to be with the defense at Purdue compared to Nick Holder? How long do you think it'll take him to get there for the team to get accustomed to his defense system in DC and maybe going to 3-4 this year?
Well, I see that it's going to take some time if he has a radically different defensive scheme than his predecessor. That's something. So what you're asking leads into the flexibility of the coaches to possibly change what they want to do versus what they should do because of the limited playing time, where they didn't have the spring practice to institute or install a new defense or a new offense, and they may need to do that in waves throughout the season and keep these kids comfortable in the scheme that they're accustomed to, where they don't have the time and didn't have the spring practice to install a new offense or defense.
Okay, I was asking because I wasn't sure about Bob Diaco and stuff like that, because someone said he ran the 3-4 defense.
Yes.
And you know more about him than he did than I do.
Well, I know his background. I don't know enough about Purdue's defensive personnel other than he had a really good defensive showing 2 years ago, meaning 2017. Jeff Brom's first year, the defense won you the 7 games for the most part, as you well know. The defensive improvement was substantial, but you lost most of that defense, 8 or 9 starters off the defense, and took a big plunge the next 2 years, and had all those injuries last year. But I haven't caught up on Purdue defensive personnel.
I believe they got 8 starters coming back from next year.
Okay.
So I was just trying to figure out what his system and stuff like that, and how do you think that'll benefit maybe like George Karlaftis and Lorenzo Neal being in a 3-4.
Well, from what I've seen out of Lorenzo Neal, he's and again, you're talking to somebody who watches Purdue play 4 or 5 games a year, depending on how good they are. And I'm not breaking down tape, but based on what I know of Lorenzo Neal, based on what I've seen, that he is a 3-4, can be a 3-4 nose tackle.
And how do you think that with Karlaftis? Do you think he'll still be a D end, or do you think he'll put him in as a D tackle?
Well, it depends how strong they are. If they're playing obviously a 3-4, he's going to be a D end. If they're playing a 4-3, probably their best bet. And again, I'm just spitballing, not knowing the rest of the personnel around him. So it depends on whether they're stronger at tackle or at end. But you typically want to take your best athlete, which he is on defense, and throw them on at the defensive end position. You want him coming off the edge.
All right. Hey, Mark, thanks for your time. Have a great night.
Michael, we appreciate it. And look out for tomorrow. I will have my Purdue schedule preview released first thing in the morning.
All right, we'll do. Appreciate it. Have a great night, Mark.
Okay, Michael, take care. I will not address the 16 playoff tonight. I will get to that. Matt and others, we will review why the 16 playoff does not work. Does not work. All right. Once again, I appreciate it, especially Matt. Thank you so much for the contribution, because you've caught the vision. You understand what we're trying to build here full-time here at Mark Riders TV, the voice of college football. For everybody else, we will be back. I believe we will be back tomorrow night at 6 o'clock Eastern time for Notre Dame live for a full hour. Join us then. And yes, McD, you would like a Purdue fan calling in. I like to hear from the fan bases that don't reach the elite status. You talk about hardcore college football fans that love the sport. Love it. All right, guys, we appreciate it. We will see you soon. And again, Notre Dame at 6 o'clock tomorrow night. But all fan bases are welcome. See ya.